I know you've wondered how some podcasters have such incredible guests on their podcast that have hundreds of thousands of followers, and you can't seem to figure out how to crack the code on doing the exact same. Or have you found yourself struggling to get guests on your podcast, and maybe you're spending way too much time when it comes to scheduling? If this sounds like you, today's episode is a game changer that you are not going to want to miss. Welcome back to As It Relates to Podcasting. I'm Simona, and today we are talking about one of the most important systems for any podcaster, which is your guest booking workflow. Whether you're an existing podcaster that has this system set up already, or you're brand new looking to create a booking workflow for yourself, I'm going to take you through step by step on exactly how you can do just that. Let's go. The first step in your guest booking workflow is how you reach out to book your guests. This is where it all begins, and you want to make sure that you get it right. So let's talk about that. How do you do it to get it right? The first thing you want to do is create a template for your outreach emails. So this is, instead of you sitting down to write and rewrite a brand new template or a brand new pitch or a brand new email every single time you want to book someone on your podcast, what you're doing is creating a template that you can take and repurpose every single time. You want to make sure that the tone of this reflects your personality, reflects your brand personality, and also reflects the tone of the show overall. Your podcast has a personality. So whatever the personality is of your show, you want to make sure that what you are writing and how you're reaching out to guests is reflecting the personality of the podcast. In this email, you want to briefly explain what your show is about. You want to talk about some of the topics that you cover, and you also want to explain to the person that you're pitching why you want to have them on the podcast. This is a really important piece, but also the topics that you think they can cover that would be beneficial for your audience and why your audience is going to find it beneficial. You also want to include some additional details of where the podcast is going to be published, whether it's on YouTube or on Apple or Spotify or any of the podcast apps. And you also want to include in there any booking details and specific timeframes that you have for recording, if you have any. In this series of emails, you also want to include what they can expect and what you are expecting from the overall interview process. Your action step here is to draft that initial email and to save it somewhere that you can continue to repurpose it and rewrite it anytime you need. If you want a little bit of help, I have in my membership some scripts that you can literally take, plug and play into your process right away. And the link for the membership is in the episode notes below. This resource has been an absolute game changer for those who are in the membership because it takes the stress out of trying to figure out what exactly to say, how exactly to structure it, and it helps you create a booking email sequence that your guests are absolutely going to love. So be sure to check that out in the episode notes below. The next thing that you want to do is leverage your network. Whether you're reaching out to a former guest or someone that you know in your niche market, or even another podcaster, you want to use your network to help find and connect with future guests. Word of mouth and past guests having a really good experience on your podcast is so powerful when it comes to booking future guests. So do not hesitate to reach out to past guests for an intro to somebody else that they may know, or another podcaster in your space, another person in your niche market. People are typically pretty happy to make connections when they feel aligned. So don't ever be shy to reach out to your network and just ask. So your action step here is to reach out to previous guests that you've had or people in your network to make those connections and to help grow your own network as well. The third thing I want to touch on today is automating everything with a guest intake form. This is a really key piece, and it's something that we use with all of our agency clients, all of our management clients, is having a guest intake form so that you can capture all of the information that your guest has to share in one spot. This limits you from having to go back and forth constantly and trying to chase down information, making sure you have all the right bios, the headshots, the links, the promos, everything that comes with being a podcast guest. You'll have it all in one neat, tidy spot, which is something that is so helpful when it comes to creating show notes and getting your episode ready to go live. So your action step here is to create a Google form or a type form or a Jot form, wherever it is that's integrated into your software already, and include fields like the first name, the last name, email, address, social media handles, bio, headshot, and any promos that someone may have that they want to share with your audience. You can also use this to get them to consent to being on your show, and you can have a little checkbox at the bottom. Again, if you would like a little additional resource on that, we do have one that you can take and implement directly from the membership, so you can check that out in the episode notes below. This first stage here is all about reaching out in a way that saves time, sets expectations, and keeps you organized. Okay, now we're into scheduling and preparation. Once you've reached out to your guest and they've confirmed, now it's time to book your interview and prepare for the recording. And honestly, this is where things can start to get really, really messy if you don't have a solid booking process or booking system in place. This is one of the key things that we always start with every single management client that we take on, or every single launch client that we take on, is making sure that they have a solid booking process for their guests, because it makes the guest experience so much better, and it also makes your experience so much easier. So let me walk you through how we streamline it. The very first thing that we're going to do is use a scheduling tool. You can use something like Calendly, you can use Acuity, you can use Microsoft, you can use Go High Level. That's what we use within my agency. But the reason why you're using this is because nobody likes to go back and forth, constantly trying to figure out when there is a time that works to record. So if you have a booking calendar already done, already set up, all you have to do is just send your link to your guest. They can pick the date and the time that works best for them in your calendar, and you've just omitted your entire back and forth process. So your action step here is to set up that booking calendar with the booking days and times that you're available, and get that off to your guest so that they can schedule in. Now, your next step here is something that I absolutely love that we do within the agency, and it's been such a game changer for the guest booking process. It is, once you send out the booking link and they book in, they receive an automatic email that outlines every single thing that they need to know when it comes to getting ready for their podcast interview with you. This is something that you can draft ahead of time, similar to the pitch email that you're drafting to book in your guest. You can have this document templated and send out automatically to every single guest that you book in. Things that you can include in here are your guest intake form, your link for the recording, software recording recommendations and expectations, tips on audio quality, and tips on video quality. You can also include some topics that you will be covering. So your action step here is to create an email that plugs and plays directly into your calendar booking software, so your guests can receive all of your recording standards and your recording expectations, if you will, right off the bat. The next thing that you want to do here is confirm your logistics. This piece is really important because schedules change, especially if you're booking things out way in advance, right? People get busy, something comes up, and they can no longer make the recording. I have an automatic reminder that goes out in my booking system 24 hours ahead of time to remind people of the recording that's taking place, and it also gives them a button to reschedule if they can no longer make it. So you want to make sure that you have this touch point as well, because it'll allow your guests to have an even better experience with you. So your action step here is just to make sure that you have that reminder going out, whether you're doing it manually, which I would not recommend, but you still can, or automatically, which is super powerful because it will save you so much time and so much headache, and everything just happens on autopilot. The power in automating this whole process is so key, because it's going to save you so much time in back and forth, so much time doing admin work, and so much time confirming details that can just be done automatically. So I highly recommend that you set up your booking flow with some integration and some automation in mind. This next part here is your recording and your follow-up process. Now that you've scheduled in your recording day, let's talk about what happens on the recording day and after, because this is where it all comes together. On the day of your interview, please make sure that you are testing everything. I cannot tell you how many times I've sat down to record and my tech just doesn't work. The camera turns off, the battery dies, the lights don't want to work, and the mic's not connected. So the more testing that you can do in advance, the more you will save yourself trouble and headache right before you're recording. So I know for my own self, if I have a podcast recording that I'm going to be doing, I'm just going to test the link. I'm going to make sure it works. I want to make sure that my mic is connected properly, that my camera is working properly, and that the lights are working properly. These are all the components that allow me to make sure that the quality that I'm putting out there is what I want to put out there. So just take that extra second to set it up and have it be way more streamlined than just winging it on the fly. And also too, you can test your internet connection, because ultimately all of these things mixed together just create an amazing guest experience for your guest that's going to be logging on. Because honestly, no one wants to sit there while you're fiddling around with your camera, your mic, your lights. You should just already have it set up and you should have it organized. And so giving yourself some room and some space will allow you to do it without any stress when you're on the actual recording itself. So your action step here is check your calendar on your days of your recordings. Give yourself 10-15 minutes to get everything set up properly before you go and hit record. Now, the second thing I want to talk about in this section is kind of having that icebreaker moment. When you get on a recording with someone, it can feel a little awkward at first, especially if you've never met them before. So ask them questions about themselves, maybe about their day, how they are, what they're looking forward to, or some kind of icebreaker question just to set the mood, just to set the tone. The goal here is to make them comfortable. It's to calm their nerves and to make them feel at ease with the conversation that you're about to have. But more than that though, you want to also be building rapport. And by doing this, by asking questions and by kind of setting that tone and breaking the ice a little bit, you're building rapport with your guest that's going to translate into a way smoother conversation and a way better final outcome for you in your podcast recording. Your action step here can be just to create 1 or 2 very light questions, very fun questions that you can ask your guest when they hop on before you hit record. The last piece here that we're going to touch on is thanking your guests and following up with a thank you email. After every single guest recording that I do, I have an email that goes out, a thank you email to my guests to thank them for their time, for the conversation, and to everything that they brought to the airwaves. I love doing this because I feel like it creates such a beautiful reminder of how great the conversation was, how grateful you are for their time. And it's just a nice little touch point to make your guest feel extra loved and extra cared for. This is also where you can share your expectations of your guest in terms of promoting the podcast episode, when they expect to receive social media assets, who will send them if it's you or a production company, and so on. So this is another really great touch point to share with your guest, your expectations of, hey, I want to make sure that you share this podcast episode, so please do so. And you can share all those details in that email there. So your action step for this one here is to draft that thank you email. Similar to templating your pitch email, your booking emails, and all of the above, you can also template your thank you emails too. Again, all of the resources for this whole booking email sequence can be found in my membership, which you can access in the link below. So be sure to grab your spot in there. But if you don't want to do that, just make sure to include your release date, your links, and any attachments in that email. By creating a smooth recording process and a really thoughtful follow-up, you'll make your guest feel very valued and create space for future collaborations. And I will say this, before I started my agency in 2021, I had my Happiness Happens podcast that started in 2018. And my guests had such a good experience when they came on because I was so excited to talk to them, so excited to dive into the topic. And I just honestly cared so much about the conversation with them. And I wanted them to have the best possible experience. And one thing that they would say every single time after getting off a podcast interview with me was how much fun they had. And I absolutely loved hearing that because it made me feel like I did my job as an interviewer, as a podcaster, and as someone who is trying to dive deep into the topic of happiness. Fast forward, when I launched my agency and launched my podcast launch services, some of those very same guests that I interviewed for Happiness Happens asked me to launch their show for them because we had built such a great rapport. They had so much fun on my podcast that they wanted that experience for their guests too. So do not ever second guess how important the guest experience is and how important all of these pieces are when it comes to recording your podcast episode. Now, if you want even more, you want to go deeper, you want to go further, I've mentioned my membership to you a couple of times. Be sure to check out the episode notes below where you can grab your seat in the membership. We host weekly office hours. They are so much fun where we dive deep into your questions, deep into your concerns, and really help you bring your podcast to life one step at a time. And so here you have it, an easy step-by-step guide that you can very easily take, create, and implement into your own guest process right off the bat. This will not only save you time, but it will keep you super organized. Before we sign off, let's recap on the 3 different pieces of it. 1 is initial outreach and invitation. Make sure that you have a template and a clear system in place. 2 is scheduling and preparation. Automate what you can and give your guests all of the tools that they need to succeed. And 3 is recording and follow-up. Start strong, stay organized, and leave a long-lasting impression. Before signing off today's episode, thank you so much for your time today. Be sure to follow along so you never miss an episode, whether you're watching it on YouTube or listening to it on a podcast app. I am so grateful for your likes, your shares, your comments, and your reviews of the podcast. And if you know another podcaster that needs to or will benefit from having a booking system like this in place, don't hesitate to share it with them. Sharing with them is totally free. So thank you so much for being here, and I will see you on the next one.